yours. Let me recognize the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Murphy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Chu, at the Solyndra groundbreaking on September 4th, 2009, you said your agency, quote, moved aggressively to get stimulus money out the door, unquote. Were you aware that 4 days earlier, August 31st, the staff at OMB wrote to your agency and said, quote, I would prefer that this announcement be postponed. This is the first loan guarantee, and we should have full review with all hands on deck to make sure we get it right. Were you aware of that?
I'm aware of it now.
All right, not before then. Were you aware that the following day, on September 1st, 2009, OMB downgraded Solyndra's credit rating because of the, quote, weakening world market prices for solar generally?
Another way of saying that, yes, is that the credit subsidy score went up slightly.
There's also an email. I appreciate that. I'm just trying to move, sir. There's an email between Stephen Mitchell, managing director at Kaiser's venture capital firm, Argonaut Private Equity, and George Kaiser on March 5th, 2010, where Mitchell writes that, quote, Chu is apparently staying involved in Solyndra's application and continues to talk up the company as a success story, unquote. That's on tab 23. Now, is that a fair characterization to say that you were personally interested and personally involved in Solyndra's effort to get federal financing? Is that a yes or no?
As I said, Solyndra was the first company ahead of the line by the loan program. And so what we were doing is, in order to get loans out, we said, all right, who are the head of lines? Who are the most what are the most promising loans? Again,
the most promising, you said, sir?
The most promising.
Let's hang on to that word. Let me just, because I have to ask you some questions, because most promising is important. So were you aware that on March 16, 2010, in Solyndra's IPO filing with the SEC, PricewaterhouseCoopers said it had, quote, substantial doubt about Solyndra's ability to continue as a going concern, unquote. Were you aware of that?
I am aware of it now.
Doesn't sound most promising. Were you aware that in the following month, OMB staff began expressing concern about your agency's monitoring of the loan?
Sorry, say that again?
Were you aware that in the following month, that's April of 2010, the OMB staff began expressing concern about your agency's monitoring of the loan? Let me help you with that.
Yeah.
What they said in April was that when evaluating the riskiness of Solyndra, they said, quote, DOE seems to separate the parent from the project, but I think the deal is structured in a way that does not support that view, unquote. So at that time, were you worried that your agency's calculation of the project's risk was completely different from the OMB model?
I think there's lots of robust conversations that go on between OMB and Department of Energy, and in the end, I think OMB did not object to
could you just give me yes or no, sir? I got to
restructuring.
So were you aware that in May of 2010, 2 days before the President's visit to Solyndra, the White House advisor Valerie Jarrett and Vice President Biden's Chief of Staff Ron Klain contacted your Chief of Staff to express their worries about the, quote, going concern, quote, unquote, letter from Pricewaterhouse? Were you aware of that conversation?
No.
At any point in the spring of 2010, did you discuss with the White House the, quote, going concern letter or the disagreements between OMB and DOE on Solyndra's financial strength?
As time progressed, there would certainly—
At that point?
I can't say exactly at that point, but certainly as time progressed—
So were you aware, let me just try and get these in, were you aware that in June, after Solyndra canceled its IPO, an Office of Management Budget staffer suggested that this would be a good moment to, quote, insist that DOE ramp up its monitoring function immediately? I mean, was your agency monitoring or not monitoring up to that point?
I was told that by that time we were monitoring the loans, but we had, I'm not really sure the exact timing, but we had one. Solyndra was our first loan, and we then established a loan monitoring program, which has been consistently made more robust as time progressed.
So the following month, you had a meeting with OMB Director Peter Orszag about policy issues. Is that correct? Do you recall that meeting?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the day before your meeting, OMB and Treasury both sent your agency a list of information needed about Solyndra's finances. Did you discuss Solyndra with Mr. Orszag?
No, we were discussing much higher policy issues than a particular, I believe, at that time.
So he didn't ask you for any critical information about Solyndra's finances, including financial statements, actual performance information, market price production?
Well, my recollection at the time was that we were discussing loans, for example, about whether if you could, the loan plus 1603 plus production factors, other things, state subsidies, that some of the loans might be getting, there's a policy issue about oversubsidy.
Well, let me ask you this then. Were you aware that prior to your meeting with Mr. Orszag, OMB staffers said on June 22nd, quote, if DOE does not stay on top of the project, it risks becoming embarrassing given the high-profile S1, POTUS, and VPOTUS events over the past year. So I have to ask, you said it was promising. We have lots of other agencies saying, and PricewaterhouseCoopers, and OMB, and Treasury, people saying this was not going to work out. So my question is, will you admit that there were problems in monitoring this loan and getting you the information, or you having the information reviewed to draw a conclusion that this was promising?
By the word promising, what I mean is that that loan was ahead of the line. It was the people in the loan program that were from the previous administration, who were there in the previous administration.
Well, I didn't ask you where they were in the line. I asked you if there were problems that you were aware of that you were monitoring or not.
Well,
Does
at
decide
the
if it
time
was
of the
promising.
origination of the loan, after OMB's assigned credit subsidy score was something like 7.8%. What that means effectively is that there's a very low probability at the time in the OMB estimation that one would enter into default.
And that was when?
This was at the time of the when the loan.
But it was restructured later on, sir.
No, after restructuring, certainly then you reevaluate, and our loan program does this all the time.
Well, can you just tell me then, finally, were you aware or not of the problems with monitoring this loan?
Gentleman's
we are
time has expired.
making the loan monitoring more robust. We have a separate office, and we continue to make it more robust.
You, were you aware, do you admit there's problems with monitoring this loan by your agency?
At the beginning, when we had one loan, we began to set up a loan monitoring office. It was roughly at about the same time when the OMB said one should set up a monitoring office. We did set it up, and so within certainly weeks.
Gentleman's time has expired.